Hey guys, so this video is going to focus on how to simplify a rational expression. So rational expressions essentially is anything that can be written in fraction form to where you'd have a polynomial in your numerator and your denominator. So if you can have a polynomial in your numerator and denominator, polynomials look all sorts of different ways, and you're going to be given all sorts of different examples on how to simplify a rational expression. Now, the main thing to keep in mind is that when it's actually telling you to simplify a rational expression, well, simplify really means factor. You need to factor that thing. So you need to factor the numerator, you need to factor the denominator. So that's all going to depend on, well, what kind of example you got. There's so many different factoring techniques out there, difference of squares, reverse FOIL, grouping, difference of cubes, sum of cubes, AC method, and then there's just so much out there, right? So depending on what kind of problem you have, what specifically you have in your numerator and denominator, that's going to tell you how you need to factor that thing. Now, for this particular example, we have a trinomial over a trinomial. So when it comes to trinomials, the two different techniques that I use are either reverse FOIL or no fuss. Now, reverse FOIL is what you would use when you have a trinomial where the leading coefficient is a 1. Now, I have numbers in front of here that are not a 1, so I'm going to use no fuss. If you're not familiar with no fuss method, maybe go back and watch one of the videos based off of that. Or maybe you know your own method for factoring trinomials here. So I'm going to use no fuss method here to factor this thing. So I need to factor the numerator, I need to factor the denominator here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my numerator to the side over here so I can work on factoring that thing, and then I'll plug it back in over here. So if I'm looking at this problem here, well, first off, regardless what technique you use when it comes to factoring, the first thing that you should always look for is there a greatest common factor? That should always be your first step when it comes to factoring. Now, looking over this example here, I don't have a greatest common factor. There's nothing in common with an 8, a 10, and a 3, and I have nothing in common with a variable across all three terms. So that means I can go straight to drawing my parentheses and factoring this thing. Now, in using no fuss factoring here, this is what you do. Step 1 in no fuss factoring says to repeat the first term twice. So I'm going to say 8x, 8x. Step 2 in no fuss factoring tells us to multiply the first coefficient by the last. So 8 times 3. So we're going to multiply 8 times 3, which gives us 24. So we need to list all the factors that multiply to get 24. So list everything. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Now what we're looking for is we want which combination of these numbers are going to add or subtract to get our middle term. We have a 10. So which one of these adds or subtracts to get a 10? And actually, we need to be a little careful here because take a look at this. 12 minus 2 is a 10, but 6 plus 4 is a 10. So we need to figure out, hey, do we need them to subtract to get a 10, or do we need them to add to get a 10? This one's a little tricky here. So in order to figure that out, we actually have to figure out our signs on this one first, okay? So if we need to figure out our signs, so we need to take a look at this last term over here. This last term is negative. So remember that this last term comes from multiplying last times last. So last times last gives us this last term here in our trinomial. So we need to think, how do we get a negative when we multiply? So think about your multiplication rules, right, when it comes to integers. If they have the same sign, you get a positive answer. If they have a different sign, you get a negative answer. So that means I need different signs here. I need different signs to get this negative. Okay, so if I need to have different signs, now let's go back and think about our rules for adding with different signs. So if these were different signs, which one would give me a 10? right? So like, for example, you know, if I had a negative 6 and a 4 together, well, 4 plus negative 6 is a negative 2. Or even if I put that negative on the 4, negative 4 plus 6 is a positive 2. That's not getting me a 10. But over here on the 2 and the 12, you know, a negative 12 plus 2 is a negative 10. Or a negative 2 plus 12 is a 10. That's going to help me out there. The 2 and the 12 is the one that's going to give me a 10 here. So that means I'm going to use the 2 and the 12. So anytime you have more than one combination of numbers that works, you need to play around with the signs until you find that magic combination that's going to help you out here. So for us, it's the 2 and the 12. So we already said that we're going to have different signs with this particular example. Another rule that always helps me out here is this one here. Whatever sign your middle term has, the bigger number has to have it. So because my middle term is negative, that means the negative goes with the 12. And because we have to have different signs, that means this 2 over here has to be positive. Now the last step in no fuss factoring says to simplify. Either one or both of your factors will be able to be simplified. So think about simplifying a fraction, reducing your fraction. That's exactly what we're doing here. So starting by looking at this first factor here, we have an 8 and a 2. And we need to think, does an 8 and a 2 have anything in common? Well, definitely, right? Because an 8 and a 2 has a 2 in common. So I'm going to divide out that 2. And if I divide out that 2, so 8 divided by 2 is 4. Drop down that x. Plus 2 divided by 2 is 1. Move over to the second factor and see if that can be simplified. So looking at an 8 and a 12, well, they have a 4 in common, don't they? So let's divide out that 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Drop down the x with it. Minus 12 divided by 4 is a 3. So this is what I get when I factor the numerator. So I'm going to go back over here to my problem, and I'm going to put in 4x plus 1 and 2x minus 3. All right, so that's just half of our work for us because, hey, we have this denominator over here, and we need to factor that thing. So I'm going to erase this work that I have over here, right, so that we can have room here to factor our denominator. So our denominator is 8x squared minus 6x minus 9. So we need to now factor this thing. So I still have a trinomial where the leading term is not 1. So I'm going to use no fuss method once again. I do need to look over to make sure I don't have a greatest common factor here and I don't see one. So I'm going to draw my parentheses and go straight to factoring. Starting by repeating the first term. So 8x, 8x. Then do first times last. 8 times 9 is a 72. Factors of 72. 1 times 72. 2 times 36. 3 times 24. 4 times 18. 5 doesn't go in, 6 goes in 12 times, 7 doesn't go in, but 8 times 9 does. So we're looking for which combination of these adds or subtracts to get a 6, our middle term. So let's see, which one gives me a 6 here? That would be the 6 and the 12. So I'm going to put in the 6, I'm going to put in the 12, then focus on my signs. Starting with whatever sign my middle term has, the bigger number has to have it. So 12 is bigger than 6, so that means 12 is going to get that negative. And looking at this back term over here, that's a negative. So remember, same signs positive, different signs negative. So because I have a negative, that tells me I have to have different signs. So that means this needs to be a plus over here. So then also remember our last step when it comes to no fuss factoring is we have to simplify one or both of our factors in the end. Taking a look at our first factor, an 8 and a 6 have a 2 in common. So I'm going to divide out a 2, giving me, well, 8 divided by 2 is 4. Drop down the x with it. Plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. Moving on to the second one, I also have something in common here because an 8 and a 12 have a 4 in common. So I'm going to divide out of 4 there, getting me 8 divided by 4 is 2x, minus 12 divided by 4 is 3. So let's take that and plug it in down over here. All right, so when we are done factoring, so remember, in simplifying a rational expression, we need to factor the numerator, we need to factor the denominator, and now the fun part. We did all of that factoring so that we can cancel out any common factors. Because remember, we have a rule in math that says if we have the same thing over the same thing, those are going to cancel out to a 1. So now we need to check and see, do we have any common factors? So I see here, hey, I have a 2x minus 3 and a 2x minus 3. Those are definitely the same thing. So I'm going to cancel those out. 4x plus 1 is not the same thing as 4x plus 3. You cannot cancel the 4x with the 4x. This is all one thing together. You can't just get rid of a piece of it. So these are not the same. So your answer is everything that is left over. So we have a 4x plus 1 over a 4x plus 3 left over. So this would be our final answer here. So just remember, when it comes to simplifying rational expressions, factor the numerator, factor the denominator, cancel what you have in common, and put back together everything else.